What's up guys, my name is Sean from YJ Productions. You just saw that little intro. We're gonna talk about coloring today. And to start with coloring, I have to talk about composition, cameras, and lighting. I promise this will be short and then we'll hop into Resolve and talk about the nitty-gritty stuff. First off, a little bit of specs. Red Dragon, Super 35 camera. If you're on full frame, this is a 1.17 crop, shooting at 24mm, that equals 28 for those who wanna have quick math. And then we have a quarter stop of a mist filter from K&F Concept. I just wanted to kind of lower the contrast and it didn't have a low con filter with me today, so we used that instead. Obviously, we're using lights. This is a Quasar tube light. You could use any tube light to kind of achieve what I'm about to talk about. Obviously, if you see in the room behind me, we have some tungsten lights. So I set this to 3000 Kelvin, put it back here, and that's where you get that splash of orange on the left and the right. I pulled it back to make it a little bit more of a hard light, a little bit more like it's coming from a lamp that's been diffused but is a little far away. Motivation is important when it comes to lighting because this is an outside perspective looking in. When you're lighting, when you're coloring, you want to think about the story, perspective, and why things should look the way they do. Sometimes technically correct isn't storyline correct. You got to be careful with what you decide to do. Sometimes making something perfect makes it dull. And that's kind of the point of this shoot right here, because every other light is at 5600 Kelvin. I wanted it to look dull, but interesting. And part of that does come down to composition. Good lighting usually will equal good coloring. It's pretty hard to mess up good lighting. You have to kind of try to do it. So let's move into the studio, talk about the rest of the lights, and then we'll jump into Resolve. Real quick before we continue with the lighting side of this tutorial, I promise we'll get to the coloring soon. Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. And if you have any questions, leave those in the comment section as well. I try and respond to almost all of the comments if I can, and I enjoy talking with you guys and learning with you guys as well. Back to the video. Right behind me is the key light I use for basically everything. Obviously, the window is our motivation. We're using this kind of to copy the window source. It's a nice, soft daylight light coming in, so I'm just gonna pump that over and across the desk over here, which is in front of me. So I wanted to do that. Now, secondly, have one of these right here, another Quasar. Now, this Quasar was pretty important. Here's what we did. I took the light and I'm bouncing it off of the ceiling, which is white. You can see this whole room is basically a bunch of white walls. And I took another Quasar and I aimed it downwards over the desk. Now, what this did primarily was give a little bit of ambience to the room. So for those desk shots where we're doing these close-ups, you can see the camera, I wanted to lift the levels a little bit because it was super dark. It would have looked horrible. So I raised the levels by bouncing light off the ceiling, which gives us a nice ambience, and then shooting light directly at it, which also gives it some shape. I wanted a little bit more hard light in there to, kind of shape things up a little bit. Makes the coloring process a whole lot more easy. And then lastly, when I'm actually sitting there looking at the computer, I have another Quasar sitting behind the computer on my desk, shining that light at me, and that's how you're getting that screen glow from that, so that way I can drop the exposure on the camera and keep everything at the levels I want them at. Okay, now let's jump into Resolve. I have yet to actually color any of this in real life, so whatever you saw at the beginning was a result of me tweaking and grading for a little while. So let's go ahead and start the grade right now. Let's start on our master shot. Now, I am shooting raw, so if I want, I can come in here and mess with my ISO. However, if you don't have the opportunity to mess with your ISO, I'll show you a little trick. Go over to your HDR wheels. You can click these three dots right here. Go down, go to color space, select whatever color you're using. I'm using red wide gamut RGB. And then go down to your gamma, same thing. And I'm using red log 3G10. Again, you can choose any of this other stuff that applies to your camera. Click that. This allows you to use your global slider kind of as ISO, not quite. It doesn't work exactly like it, but it's close enough. It should work for you fairly well. I don't think I want this original clip at that high of an ISO. I did like it kind of dark, so I'm gonna drop it back to 800. Very simply, what I like to do when I'm not doing a power grade, this isn't gonna be a huge coloring tutorial, but I'm just gonna go through this pretty simply. You know what, I'm gonna pull up my power grade actually. We're gonna do the Alexa 65. I can right click on my power grade, hit apply grade. If you don't know how to do that, there you go. And this is what I typically do. I would have built this out anyways had I not clicked on the power grade, so I figured why waste everybody's time. Okay, this is a very simple power grade right here. It doesn't quite have the look I want, and that's why we're gonna go in and tweak everything. We're gonna go node by node. I have my primaries. So this is gonna be these wheels right here, also your HDR wheels. I use those in the same node. Your HSL, this can be your web. This can be over here with like your hue versus hue and saturation, which I am going to, I'm gonna tweak this a little bit actually right now. Basically I can go through, and if I wanna adjust these hues, I can. Already the image is looking better. Very nice, very nice. Next is our density. I love that Resolve added this. This is a great feature right here. For example, let's take a look at these yellows. I can adjust how dense they are. I can also adjust the saturation. Very, very nice, super useful. So I'm actually going to saturate them, and I'm gonna drop their density ever so slightly. Same deal with our greens, we can mess with those. I'm gonna keep this image kind of sort of green. I don't want it to get too not green, and then right here we have a skin tones, which does blend in with your oranges a little bit, so just beware when using those. I try and keep that fairly normal. It helps when people have like spray tans. So if you've ever worked with somebody who has a bad tan, it's too dark, it's too orange, or it's very clearly a spray tan, you can actually just come in here and you can drop that density a little bit, drop the saturation, and then people's skin looks a whole lot better. People who have pale skin like mine, you can actually increase the density and increase the saturation, and pale skin like mine looks a whole lot better. Now, next we have the curve. This is probably the most important tool. I have a lot of points on my curve. I'm actually gonna create a new curve. This is probably, you can hit Option S for a new serial node, by the way, if you don't know that. Typically what I do, this is a very dark image. So let's pretend this is a brighter image for coloring sake. A little bit more of a normally exposed image, right? So what you're gonna do is you can create a point right here and you can lift up most of the image, a lot of the midtones. Just watch that you're not clipping right there. You can actually, I've actually exposed this bright enough that you can see outside. This image is not clipping, woohoo. I'm gonna raise it a little brighter. I can still see some detail in there, but it's not too bad. Then I'm gonna create another point in the shadows, bring those down to add some contrast, and then I add another midpoint. Be careful, you don't want to push this too hard. You can start clipping, and I can shape that to where I want it to go. Obviously, this isn't the look I'm going for today, so I'm gonna throw on this other curve node. This has a lot of points because I'm very particular about my micro contrast. I like it to look a very certain way. That gives my look. I've kind of identified my curves as my look. That's how I get my look most of the time, is just through curves. Over here we have our tilt shift blur. This is kind of just a little trick I like to use that makes things look anamorphic, even if they're not. I don't always add this on anamorphic footage, but if you want your lenses to look like the Atlas Mercury or Atlas Orion lenses, this is a great way to do it. It does look nice. Same deal with this radial blur right here. These are both O effects. Let me click on them. Yep, here you go, tilt shift blur and radial blur. So I can like crank this and you can see what that does. I usually keep it pretty low. You can see that's obviously doing something. Usually drop it somewhere around here. Just make things look a little more interesting, a little more stylized. Now, at first I wasn't a fan of this node. This is the film look node, also an OFX. I'll be honest, at first I didn't like it. At first I thought, this is kind of trash. However, it replaced a lot of other nodes in my node tree. I like the fact that you can like mess with the effects and the color blend. Like I'll toggle this off and on, off and on. It adds some micro contrast, which I like. It adds a little halation, a little bloom, a little glow, which I appreciate. You can go in through here and literally mess with a ton more stuff. The grain, I like 65mm grain. I think 35mm grain emulated looks really bad because we see a lot of 35mm grain. We don't see a lot of 65mm grain, so I like adding that on top instead. I think it looks better. I try and make it a little softer, a little kind of quieter in the background, visible, but not too visible. We'll see how YouTube handles it. Sometimes YouTube likes to treat grain like noise and get rid of it, but that's all right. Overall, that's our before image, that's our after image. Again, I told you this wasn't really gonna be a technical coloring tutorial, and it's not. But these are the nodes I use, and it gets me the image I want. Sometimes, when I'm not using a mist filter, I'll actually get my glow O effect. I'll drop that on here, right? You're about to see something real cool. Okay, I'm gonna take my shine threshold and drop it to 0, okay? Now we're gonna go in here, drop our saturation, go to composite type, go down to soft light. Bam, okay. We're gonna boost our highlight recovery a little, drop our opacity. off, on, off, on. It adds glow around the highlights, and it adds contrast to the image, but a very soft contrast. It leaves the midtones kind of alone, and you can kind of adjust your opacity to, like, if I really crank it, obviously you can see it's very contrasty, but it doesn't look too bad. It doesn't look like I've cranked the contrast knob, but there's a whole lot more contrast. I think it looks very nice if you're trying to create some situation like this, which is why I use a ProMist filter. I would have liked the low con filter again, but I don't have one on me. I'm gonna take the glow off right now because I don't need it. I've already created my look. Now I am gonna go back down and drop this to 800 ISO. Obviously you saw the color change. That's because in my primaries, I'm using the lift to control that darker toned look. And we're just gonna send it back this way a little. And I'm gonna adjust the gain. Okay, now we have what I'd consider to be, whoops. Now we have what I would consider to be our look. I love how this looks. I think I'm gonna go in and adjust the ISO to be 1280. I like a little bit of noise in my image on the Red Dragon sensor. I think it looks great. It has a great noise pattern. It looks kind of like grain. When you mix it with grain, it looks very realistic. I like it. However, adding noise into image is a creative choice, and that's not for everybody, so do with that what you will. Here's what I like to do. For time's sake, I'm going to select all of these and hit apply grade to everything. Boom, okay? Now we're gonna go to each shot and kind of take a look at these and see how they perform. I'd be sitting there, right? Okay, now we're gonna go to our next shot. It's a little bit bright on the right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create an extra node. Like, you can just see that it's a little too bright. And I'm just gonna go in and go to my masks, create a linear gradient. I love this one, by the way. And I'm just gonna go over to my HDR wheels, color space, and my gamma. I'm gonna select both of those for this camera, and I'm just gonna drag the light of everything down, not too much, and the global of everything down, again, not too much. Okay, we can kind of see what this is doing right here. That's off and that's on. It makes everything look a little softer. It makes everything look a little more realistic. Each image is different. You have to treat each image as its separate scene. They're all gonna look slightly different. I can copy this color, and sometimes like this, it looks real good straight off the bat. That matches our main shot pretty well, right? That looks pretty good. It's a little bright, but I can just go in here and take my highlights down a little bit, take my gain down a little bit. Maybe those highlights are too much. Take that gain down a little bit. I can match that real easy. Go to our next shot. Again, looking a little bright in the highlights. Let's take that down, okay. There we go. And here's what I do. When I have repeating shots, I'll actually just delete the grade on that and apply the one I've already done just to save a little bit of time. That's good. We've already redone this one, so check that out. That looks pretty good. Got a nice little glow on the top left, and then our ending shot. And there you go. That's how to grade in Resolve at a very basic level. There are a lot of great coloring tutorials on YouTube. If you want to check those out and go watch those and learn more, that's great. I'm not really a coloring channel. If you guys enjoy that, leave a comment. Maybe I'll do more of it. I can do color breakdowns of videos I've done, I guess. But that's pretty much how you do it. If you want to create a look, that's how you do it. You can copy all the settings I've done in my video. At some point, I'll probably create a Patreon and put power grades up there or whatever. If you guys are interested in that, leave a comment for that below. Please like and subscribe, and until next time.